nothing.
For those of you just joining us, much of Metropolis remains under a dusk-to-dawn curfew following the death of Superman. The world-renowned hero laid down his life to stop a berserker monster called Doomsday, who threatened to level the city following a several-state rampage which resulted in over 500 deaths and left Justice League America in disarray. Superman joined the battle at midday, but though he fought valiantly, he seemed unable to stop Doomsday's odyssey of death and destruction. It was, tragically, a fight to the finish, which claimed the lives of both combatants. And though many made heroic efforts, they were unable to revive the Man of Steel. He was finally taken to Metro General Hospital, where it is my sad duty to inform you that Superman was declared dead at approximately 6:23 p.m. For more on this story, we go now live to Scott Harris.
You're listening to Just Another Fanboy Presents The Death of Superman, and this is episode number 8, Reaction. Hello and welcome to Just Another Fanboy Presents. I'm your host. My name is Steven, and today we drop into week 8 of the Death of Superman epic crossover event with Action Comics number 685, which was released this week 30 years ago on December 1st, 1992. It had a cover price of $1.25, and the title to the issue is Reaction, and that's RE:action, like the reply on an email or a memo regarding action. I believe that's really what they were going for at the time. Regarding action is what that stands for. So this was written by Roger Stern, pencils by Jackson Guice, inks by Denis Rodier. The letters were done by Bill Oakley, and the colorist was Glenn Whitmore. So before we get into the issue, I want to talk about the cover for just a moment. We haven't really been talking about the covers too much so far in this series of episodes, but this is, as it says at the top of the cover, Funeral for a Friend, number 2. And the cover is a homage to the first appearance of Superman in Action Comics number 1. And in this case, we have Supergirl holding a car above her head, smashing it into a wall, and people running away in terror. And those people in this case would be the criminals who are at one point inside the car. And the same thing can be said of Action Comics number 1. I've often heard people who are not familiar with the story that appears in Action Comics number 1 who make reference to the people around Superman as he's smashing the car to the ground, that they are just ordinary citizens, onlookers, passersby who are running away in terror at a man who can lift a car above his head and smash it into the ground. But no, these were criminals who were inside the car at the time. So I wanted to make sure and point that out because it's kind of the Superman creative teams collectively using this cover to express the feeling that Superman is gone and right now in his place is Supergirl. And it says on the front, the all new Metropolis Marvel. So let's get into what happened inside the issue. And as I tried to do in each episode, I'm going to give you a summary of the issue first, and then I'll kind of go in and just talk about my thoughts as I was reading the issue. I've been getting my summaries off of DCFandom.com. Some of the previous episodes, I didn't have a summary there to read. And in this episode, while I did have a summary there to read, I was not very happy with it. Whoever wrote it, I'm not going to throw anybody under the bus, but it wasn't a great summary. And by that, I mean, it wasn't that they left a lot out or they spoke on stuff that didn't happen. No, it just wasn't written very well. And I understand that these summaries are meant to be brief, but there really was just a lot of really bad typos. And by typos, I don't mean spelling. I mean, I'm talking about words that shouldn't have been there or sentences that don't end or just kind of stop without, but before the sentences are supposed to end. It's like somebody took a couple of different summaries and took small bits from other summaries and just kind of threw them at this summary. And those words just showed up in various places. And Yeah, I don't want to spend too much time on that. So basically, I rewrote the summary. So this is the summary from DCFandom.com for Action Comics number 685 as edited by me. We open with a news report from WLEX that recaps Doomsday's rampage, his battle with Superman, and Superman's subsequent demise. The news anchor then hands the story off to an on-the-scene reporter outside the city morgue who attempts to speak on the issue of what to do with Superman's body, as he has no known next of kin. Before he can get much deeper into his report, the broadcast is cut off due to an unknown technical issue. Inside the city morgue, Captain Sawyer and her team find themselves in a standoff with Paul Westfield and his Cadmus soldiers, who had just moments earlier stormed into the morgue demanding to be given Superman's body. Westfield is also, it turns out, behind the news report's technical difficulties, as we learn that he also has soldiers stationed outside who have shot down the news van's microwave dish. The Guardian attempts to stop the crew from Cadmus, but Westfield pulls rank. However, when word of this comes to Luthor, he decides to fix things, sending Supergirl and Team Luthor in to intervene. When Supergirl finds out that Westfield wants to take Superman's body, she ends the fight swiftly. Soon after, Luthor arrives with Mayor Berkowitz. The mayor has with him official papers from the White House declaring that Superman is an American citizen and so deserves a decent burial. Luthor lets Westfield know that he will ignore what Cadmus has done and what they attempted to do if Westfield and his soldiers get out of Metropolis as fast as they can. With the news van fixed, Luthor gives a little speech declaring that a portion of Centennial Park will be host to Superman's final resting spot. At the Daily Planet, Lois, Perry, and Jimmy listen to the broadcast before Perry sends everyone home for the night. As Jimmy and Perry worry about Lois, everyone else reacts to the news. In Smallville, Lana calls the Kents to check up on them, hoping that the news about Superman, who she knows as Clark, is a mistake. In a restaurant, 3 customers are also in shock, and they recall an incident in which Superman and Batman saved their town from vampires. From Australia to Japan to the Middle East, Africa, and Russia, news of Superman's death is broadcast all around the world. In the coroner's office, Luthor is brought in to see Doomsday's remains, and enraged, he smashes a chair over the beast's body. To the others, it appears as if Luthor's rage is due to his sorrow at Superman's death, when in reality, Luthor is angry that he was not the one to end Superman's life, and he feels cheated and robbed of the one thing he desired above all else. Lois goes to Clark's apartment, and once inside, she collapses. She realizes the world must never know that Superman and Clark are one and the same, and then resolves to call his parents. Meanwhile, from Toyman to Parasite to the prisoners in Stryker's Island, the criminal element react to the news of Superman's death. Elsewhere in Metropolis, a lone police officer stumbles upon a trio of thugs burglarizing what appears to be a jewelry store. When he tries to intervene, he's nearly run over as the 3 escape in their car. However, before they can get far, Supergirl arrives and subdues them with relative ease. Once the police arrives, she flies away and Bibbo catches sight of her, thinking for a moment that it might be Superman. He makes his way back to his bar, the Ace of Clubs, and kicks everybody out, closing early. Once alone, he drops to his knees and prays, asking God, why should Superman die when a washed-up old redneck like me goes on living? And as the book ends, Bibbo tells God that it ain't right. It just ain't right.
Superman Radio Revisited, hosted by Matthew T. Cody. This is going to be a new podcast which will be exploring the Superman radio show of the 1940s. It will begin by playing an episode unfiltered, unedited, uncensored, uncut, followed by my commentary. We're going to talk about the era a little bit and any interesting things that crop up in the episodes. I think it'll be a lot of fun, and I'm hoping to make it an interactive show. So come along. It's going to be a great time.
In a previous episode, I believe when I was talking about the upcoming Funeral for a Friend, the second act in the whole death and return of Superman event, I feel like I don't feel like, I know that I talked about how the Funeral for a Friend portion of the story was a bit boring and kind of a slog to get through. That's what my memory was of this portion of the story. And I believe I also said in another episode that I was going to stop talking about what I remember in regard to any future issues or story points or anything that my memory tells me is coming up. I know I talked about that I was going to stop mentioning that stuff because, for example, in this case, here we are, the second of the Superman issues to get into Funeral for a Friend. And I rather enjoyed it. It's obviously a bit different than what we've been reading so far because there's not a giant raging monster destroying buildings and punching Superman through houses and throwing cars and junk like that. But with the exception of that Justice League issue that came right after the death of Superman, so far, I think they're doing a pretty good job of establishing where the world is now following Superman's death. Now, granted, this is only if you take away that Justice League issue, which is Justice League America number 70, this is only the second issue into Funeral for a Friend. The previous one was Adventures of Superman 498, which we talked about in the last episode, but whatever this feeling was that I had of Funeral for a Friend being a real slog, so far, 2 issues in, I haven't found that to be the case. We have a lot here where they're trying to show us various reactions in the way the world is dealing in the aftermath of Superman dying. I think at this point, folks are still in shock over what happened. You know, the news is still quite fresh and people are still a bit in disbelief. And there were a couple of moments in this issue that referenced storylines or something that may have happened in a previous issue of a Superman book before the death of Superman. And I don't recall if I've talked about this yet or not. I feel like I have. But after Crisis on Infinite Earths, I was not reading Superman until after Crisis on Infinite Earths. And in fact, I really wasn't reading any DC comics at all until post-Crisis. And I certainly wasn't collecting comics at the time of the Crisis. It was actually my older brother. And he worked at a comic book store and he would buy books and he'd come home and he'd read them. And then he would lay them out on the steps that led up to his bedroom. And before bed, my younger brother and I could walk over to those steps and pick up a stack of comics to read that night before bed. And so he was picking up, he didn't pick up any DC books until after the Crisis. And he picked up John Byrne's Man of Steel, the 6-issue miniseries that in essence rebooted Superman for a post-Crisis DC universe. And then he continued on to buy the titles that came out of that, Superman, Adventures of Superman, and Action Comics. But at some point he stopped because I know that I never finished Byrne's tenure on Superman. And when I started collecting comics in the 90s, I don't want to say I wasn't collecting comics at the time that Man of Steel, Byrne came on to Superman, because technically I did have a subscription to both Captain America and G.I. Joe. So I was collecting those comics. And I know that I was also getting the ElfQuest books that Marvel was putting out. But you know what? We'll talk about that later. That might be a little tease to season 2 of Just Another Fanboy Presents. But when I officially started working a job and earning my own money and driving a car and driving into a comic book store every week to pick up issues that I had on a pull list and stuff like that, I was not reading a lot of DC comics until the death of Superman came about. And that's when I started purchasing Superman books. So everything between sometime in the middle of the John Byrne Superman era and Superman Man of Steel number 18, which kicks off the Death of Superman event. I didn't read any of those issues at all. Didn't read them. And I still haven't read many of them. And so they make little references, like I said, throughout these issues. One of them happens after the incident between Cadmus and the Metropolis police when they fight over who is going to get custody of Superman's body. And as Westfield and Guardian and Cadmus is leaving, Guardian on his motorcycle is thinking to himself, I know that Westfield had it in for Superman, but I never thought he'd stoop so low as to pick a fight over the man's body. And there's a little asterisk there, and it references us to an issue of Superman. It looks like 58. I can't quite see it very well from where I'm sitting on the computer monitor, because I'm looking at this through the DC Universe Infinite desktop version. And then there's the moment when we see the news report going out after this, and we see various places listening to the news or watching the news and reacting to the death of Superman. And we are at this little cafe, Gaspers. It's you see a portion of the sign, and they make reference to Superman and Batman saving them when their town was overrun by vampires. And that has a little asterisk and an editor's note that tells us to check out Action Comics Annual number 1. And so, well, that would have been a burn book, I would assume. I don't remember that happening at all either. So maybe that was at the point that my brother had stopped collecting those books. But it just, I'm not talking about the death of Superman right now, and I really should be, but it made me realize that I need to go back and read all that stuff between, and I'll be doing that at some point. That's not a tease to anything that's coming up on podcasts. I'm just saying I need to read that stuff. So we get the standoff there at the beginning between Cadmus and the Metropolis police. Now, before that, I do want to point out the opening to this issue where we get the news report of everything ultimately that had happened up to this point with the battle between Superman and Doomsday. I found that to be It's literally a page and then maybe 2 panels on the next page. And I thought it did a really good job of recapping the entire first arc of this event. I mean, because really it's kind of funny that you can really encapsulate what is 7 issues and the event, everything that happened within those 7 issues, that you can recap it just in a news report. I thought it was as a writer, I found that device very appealing. I thought that was a nice, I looked at that and I said, that was a good idea. That was a really good way to recap what's happened without making it look like you're wanting to catch everybody up. I really enjoyed that. Then we get the standoff, like I said, between Cadmus and the police. And I enjoyed that as well, especially when Supergirl shows up, because again, I'm not all that familiar with who Supergirl is at this time in the DC universe. I know that she's not Kara Zor-El. Is that her name? That's who she is now. And that's who she was before the crisis. And I know that she's not who ends up being Power Girl. There's the whole Supergirl, Power Girl thing. It's very confusing. But again, I was not reading the Byrne books by the time Byrne introduced this new version of Supergirl. And my only reading experience with her is through this crossover event, which I'm only reading for the 3rd time. The last time I read it was maybe 4 years ago. And then the first time I read it, of course, was back in 92, 93. So we get to learn a bit about her powers in this issue. We know that she is some kind of protoplasmic matrix being from another dimension, but that she can change her shape, and that she has taken the form of Supergirl. I don't know why exactly she has. I'm assuming it's to honor Clark or Superman and their friendship, or maybe she idolizes him. I don't know. They don't talk about any of that here at this point. So again, I got to go back and read all that stuff. But she does this thing here as soon as she finds out that why Cadmus and Westfield are there, because you got this whole standoff and it's getting really tense. And then suddenly Team Luthor shows up with Supergirl, and Westfield yells out to her, "You're making a mistake. We're an authorized federal agency." which is something that I don't think I knew until I get to this issue, is that they are, Cadmus is not a private organization, or at least if they are, they're working on contracts for the federal government. But as Westfield calls out to her, somebody off panel, and I'm assuming it's Turpin, says, "Don't trust them, little lady. They want to take Superman's body." And she goes, "They what?" And something explodes out of her. And the very next panel, you have Westfield waking from an unconscious state of being. And we learn that what Supergirl had used is something called a psychokinetic blast. So she has some type of psi powers. You know, we know that she's strong and she can fly and she can change her shape. We know she's not as invulnerable as Superman, because when Doomsday punched her in, I think, what was that, issue 75 of Superman, she just immediately turned into putty, which was kind of weird. And then we learn a little bit later in this issue when she comes to the rescue of the police officer who stumbles across the three dudes that are burglarizing a jewelry store. They unload their guns at her, and she stops the bullets using her mind in midair. So that was kind of cool. I think what I'm trying to say here is that I'm really enjoying this version of Supergirl. I'm liking this version, even though she didn't stand a chance to old Doomsday. I'd like to say she folded like a card player with a bad hand, but no, she literally turned into putty when Doomsday hit her. It was pretty weird. We get another one of those moments where we are reminded that we didn't just lose Superman, that, when it comes to folks like Lois Lane and Jonathan and Martha Kent and Lana Lang, they didn't lose Superman. They lost Clark Kent. In the case of Lois, she lost her fiance and the man she was going to spend the rest of her life with. In the case of Lana Lang, she lost her best friend from school. And then, of course, in the case of Jonathan and Martha Kent, they lost their son. And I feel like I got to keep talking about this. It's not enough for the poor Kents that they had to watch their son die on television. They also had to watch as the rest of the nation viewed this battle almost as a form of entertainment. Because again, one of the points they're trying to make with this story, with this whole crossover event, is that the world by this point has taken Superman for granted, both the fictional characters within the DC universe and those of us who are reading the books. Everybody assumes that Superman's always going to win. There's nothing that he can't triumph over because he is an all-powerful, godlike being. And so this is where they pull the rug out from everybody, And so as this is being broadcast on live television, the news, the 24-hour news cycle, I don't quite remember if that was a thing back then. I feel like it was. It's not like it is now, but people are sitting in their homes watching this, and they're watching it like it's a freaking wrestling match or something. They're so sure that Superman's going to survive that, it's a fun thing to watch on TV. And Jonathan and Martha have to watch this knowing that, or not knowing, but fearing for the life of their son, because regardless of who Superman and Clark is, they're still his parents, and they're always going to worry. And you combine that with the fact that now they have to mourn the loss of their son, but they can't mourn his death in public. They have to go on with, the story, with the lie that Clark is missing. Because when Superman and Doomsday were fighting there in Metropolis, they brought down a number of buildings. By this point in the story, there are still hundreds and hundreds of people missing, trapped under buildings. Some of them are alive and just waiting to be rescued, but many of them have died. And so, of course, for one of the things that Lois has to deal with in this issue is she's got these people around her who care about her and are trying to make her feel better by trying to keep her spirits up. And, don't worry, Lois, Clark's, he knows what he's doing. He'll get out of this. He's a survivor. They're going to find him. You just have to keep your hopes up. And, that's got to be hard to listen to, after a while, that you got to just at some point just go, F you, you have no idea what you're talking about. He's dead. And, I think she could legitimately say that to people, and they would just, they would forgive her for lashing out, because in their minds they would they would know that she knows that, because I think Perry says it at one point that regardless of the fact that they're still combing through the buildings, they're still combing through the rubble, they're still looking for survivors, he doesn't really think that Clark survived. He thinks that Clark and most of the people that are missing, they didn't survive. And so, yeah, that's got to be hard for Lois and eventually Martha and Jonathan. The thing that Martha and Jonathan have right now that Lois doesn't is they have each other. And Lois at this point has nobody. And she's got to try to deal with this by herself. And then, of course, we have Lana, who knows that Clark and Superman are the same person. She, when she calls Jonathan and Martha, she calls from a phone booth. I want to do that thing where you say, kids, if you don't know what a phone booth is, but I don't think I have anybody listening to this episode that doesn't know what a phone booth is. I don't think I have any young listeners. But when she calls Jonathan and Martha, she says that she and Pete were on the road. We don't know where they're at. They could just be, they could have been heading to the grocery store. They could still be in Smallville. I don't know. They don't really say. Pete would be, now I can't think of Pete's last name. Basically, when Clark grew up, his two biggest childhood friends were Pete and Lana. And I don't know why I can't remember Pete's last name. But I know that he told Lana that, who he is. He's Superman. And I don't know if he ever told Pete. I think post-crisis Pete knows, or pre-crisis Pete knew about Superman and Clark, but I don't know if post-crisis Pete does. What is his last name? Okay, I'm sorry. I got to look this up. Pete Ross, that's his name. Played by Sam Jones III in the Smallville TV show. I really enjoyed the moment with Lex breaking the chair over Doomsday's dead body, and how everybody else just assumes that he is so upset about losing Superman that this is how he's taking it out on Doomsday. I am angry at you, Doomsday, for taking Superman away from me because Superman was a hero and I loved him. And it's more, I'm angry at you, Doomsday, for taking away my opportunity for killing Superman myself, because you got to remember, this is Lex Luthor II. And as far as the rest of the world knows, he is Lex Luthor's long lost son, estranged from Lex Luthor. He grew up in Australia, has long flowing red hair, which each of the four art teams on these books draws a bit differently. I've noticed that Tom Grummett gives Lex more like shoulder length hair that just brushes the top of his shoulders, whereas everybody else, he's got this long red hair that flows down his back and just this big luxurious mane of ginger hair. And again, he's got a beard and he's got no mustache, and he looks good. He looks good. But since everybody doesn't know that he is actually a clone of the original Lex Luthor with Lex's brain implanted in this clone body, that he is in essence the original Lex Luthor, everybody loves him. He apparently came to town. Again, I wasn't reading these books when this Lex showed up, but he came to town and he posed as a big humanitarian who wanted to do, make up for his father's villainous ways. And everybody just loves him. And I don't know when everybody's going to learn the truth. But I really like that aspect in this story, that on the outside, he is this man of the people that everybody loves. And on the inside, he is just super angry that he was not the one that got to kill Superman. Beyond that, they tried to show the reactions from villains in regard to the death of Superman, but they did okay, I suppose. I mean, we get the Toy Man, his reaction, which is just, he takes no joy in Superman's passing. And I don't know that I've read really any stories in which the Toy Man is featured as the bad guy. I know that, we talk about certain superheroes like Batman and the Flash and Spider-Man. They have this rogues gallery of villains, standard villains that you think of Batman, you think of certain villains. You think of Spider-Man, you think of certain villains, and same thing with the Flash. But with Superman, it's like Superman, Lex Luthor. And when really pressed on the issue, Toyman is always put up as one of Superman's big villains, along with characters like, I guess, Bizarro and the Parasite. I don't know. I guess I never really got Toyman. I never really understood the appeal of that character. But then again, like I said, I really haven't read anything in which he's featured as a villain. So all I know is that he's a dude that makes toys that I guess are used to kill Superman. I don't know. I would need to read, if anybody knows of a go-to issue, if you want to show to me that Toyman is deserving as being one of Superman's big villains, give me an issue number, give me a title and an issue number, and I'll go read it. And, if it's 3 key issues that I need to read, whatever, let me know. I need to understand more this whole Toyman guy, because I don't get it. We also see one panel of the Parasite, who is, I don't know where he's at. He's imprisoned somewhere. This could be Star Labs. I don't know, but he's in this box that seems to be made of metal and glass, and he is above everybody. What look like scientists or maybe factory workers beneath him. I don't know. But whoever it is, wherever he's at, they're all listening to the news on the radio, and he's really angry. And he tells them to turn the bleeping radio off. And he's tired of hearing the news. Says, if I hear once more about the tragedy of Superman's death, I'm going to puke. And somebody says, shut up, Parasite. And he gets kind of angry at that. And he says, if I bet them boys over at Stryker's Island would throw a party if they knew. And so then we go to Stryker's Island, which is apparently like Alcatraz. It's a prison on an island. And we get a bunch of word balloons to show us that various prisoners are talking. We don't see the prisoners. There's just voices all over. And some of them are very happy. They're hearing rumors. It's not like they have announced at the prison that Superman's dead, but they're hearing rumors and they want to know, is it true? And somebody says that Louie's got a radio stashed, and Louie says it's true. Superman bought the farm, and some of the prisoners are really happy. One of them says, yeehaw, Superman bleeping is dead. Actually, Superman bleep is dead. So Super F, I guess, is what he's saying. Yeehaw, Super F is dead. And they spell it D-A-I-D, dead. And somebody else shouts out, you watch your mouth. Yeah, Superman saved my grandma's life once. And so there's arguing going on at the prison. Some people are upset about Superman's death. Some people are happy about it. But yeah, it's basically you get this one page to try to provide us with the villain reaction. So, they pulled it off all right, I guess. We get 2 quote unquote super villains. I don't know anything about Toyman other than that he makes toys. I'm assuming he's some kind of creepy pedophile type. I don't know, but he's talking to, I guess, one of his toys, and he's saying he always showed concern for the children. Superman thwarted the Toyman's revenge, but I take no joy in his passing. Indeed, who could? I don't get him. I don't get the guy. But yeah, so beyond that, the only other thing I wanted to point out is the way that the issue ends. Bibbo's out on the streets. It's past curfew. They mentioned at the beginning of the issue with the news report that Metropolis is under a dusk to dawn curfew. And Bibbo's out past curfew. He sees Supergirl fly over, and for just barely a moment, he's excited and realizes that it's Supergirl, and he's sad again. He's got nothing against Supergirl, but she's not his favorite. Then he goes back to his bar, which he owns, Bibbo's Ace of Clubs. And he kicks everybody out. I don't know if he's got a manager, but apparently he left his bar with patrons still inside to do whatever it was he was doing. And then when he returns, he kicks everybody out, although I think we only see 2 people there. And then he is standing alone in the bar in the dark. And that's when he prays. He's a Catholic based on the way he's praying. And that's when he asks God, why should Superman die when a washed up old roughneck like me goes on living? It ain't right, God. It just ain't right. And it's a very well done sequence because it's 3 panels. Once he starts asking God why, it's like the camera is panning back away from him. He's not kneeling. He's crouching with his hat in hands. And we are we're looking at him from the back. The camera is like pulling away, back away from him and up. And again, we just see him crouch there, just his back with his head down. It's very sad. I like Bibbo. I've said it before. I'm a fan of the character. I think he's a good man, and he tries to do right by people. But I don't always like the way they write his dialogue. Just not a big fan sometimes of the way dialogue is written to try to account for people's accents, the way they say certain things. And again, I'll point out the word favorite. Whenever he talks about Superman being his favorite, they spell it FAV'Rit, favorite. Like he says it really fast. He doesn't we're just to assume based on that the people who write this, they think that when everybody says favorite, they say favorite. And I say favorite, and I guess, I don't know the point they're trying to make with that, spelling the dialogue that way, favorite, because maybe I'm an idiot like Bibbo. Maybe I've been saying the word favorite wrong this entire time. I should always include that O in my enunciation. That is my favorite type of pie. That is my favorite podcast instead of favorite. I don't know. I think that's why that angers me, is because I feel like the writers are pointing out that I'm an idiot. I think that's what I'm getting out of it. I'm taking offense at it. I'm looking at it as a failing on my part, and it makes me flippin' angry. All right. Before we wrap it up and I get to the whole, wrapping up stuff, there's a bit in the backs of these issues that I haven't talked about so far. Again, I've been reading these through the DC Infinite Universe app, or DC Universe Infinite. I don't know what it's called. And as I've been kind of pulling out the individual issues and looking at them, it's become clear to me that I need to be looking at the individual issues, the actual issues, because in the letters column, in the backs of these, we get these 4 boxes that tell us what's coming up in the coming weeks. And so the next issue we're going to get, I want to talk about that, because I wasn't going to at first, because I figured, what's the point of telling you what's coming up in the next 4 issues if in the next issue they're going to do the same thing? And I've already talked about 3 of those issues that's coming up. But then I noticed that the little description blurbs that they've used for at least for the next few issues, they change it in each issue. So, well, for example, in the next issue we're going to get is Man of Steel number 20. And so when I look at Man of Steel number 20 and I look at what's coming up next, the issue after that is Superman number 76. So in this issue that we're looking at now, Action Comics, it gives you, what's coming up in Superman number 76. And what this tells us is different than what's in the back of Man of Steel 20. So it's like they're giving us just little bits. So I thought it would be fun each episode to talk about, quickly what's coming up to get our juices flowing. So the next issue, it says next week, but based on Mike's Amazing Comics, Mike's Amazing World of Comics at mikesamazingcomics.com. Next week, so the week of December 8th, 1992, there were no issues released in the Death of Superman crossover event. So in the back of this issue, it says that the next issue is Man of Steel number 20, but it says next week, and then next 2 weeks, and then in 3 weeks, and then in 1 month. But really, there's an off week between this one and the next one. But I'm going to ignore that and just read what they have. Next week, Superman's funeral. A massive crowd of friends and allies, citizens and superheroes gather to pay their final respects to Superman in Man of Steel number 20. In 2 weeks, Superman's body has been stolen from its tomb, and Lois is rapidly losing control. Dan Jurgens and Brett Breeding tell us the tale in Superman number 76. Then in 3 weeks, Lex is becoming paranoid about Superman's death. It is a little too similar to a trick he himself has pulled, especially with Superman's body missing. But the Special Crimes Unit is on the case, and if they can't find Superman's body, no one can. That's going to be in Adventures of Superman 499. And then next month in Action Comics, the Underworld is searched for Superman's body, and the SCU's Terrible Turpin isn't leaving without answers, even if he has to beat them out of some of the Underworld's ugliest customers to do it. See it happen in Action Comics number 686. So, yeah, that's what we got to look forward to over the next 4 episodes. But there might be a little bonus episode there for you in there as well. Tell you what, let me wrap it up. Let me go through the ending spiel, and then we'll finish with me talking about what you might be able to look forward to next week. All right. So I want to thank everybody for listening to today's episode of Just Another Fanboy Presents. If you want to drop me a line, ask me a question, or provide me with a bit of feedback, you can email me at justanotherfanboy@gmail.com, or you can use the Just Another Fanboy voice line at 785-318-6673. And you can use that number to leave a voicemail or even send me a text. And one thing I noticed is if you're looking at the show notes, for example, on Apple Podcasts, you can just touch that phone number because I put that in the show notes. You just touch that number and boom, it'll take you where you need to go. But just make sure if you send me a text, let me know who you are, because I do want to use your feedback in a future episode. And I want to be able to tell folks who provided me with that feedback. Now, I know that some of you have, I've gotten a little bit of feedback so far, and we'll be talking about that feedback really soon. You can also reach out to me on Twitter by using the handle @StephenOrElse, or join us in all the fun over at the message boards by going to forum.justanotherfanboy.com. And hey, if you feel inclined to throw a little support my way, because podcasting, it just ain't free, folks. You can join it's free for you. You don't have to pay anything, but I have to pay for hosting services. So, I'm happy to do that. I've been doing it so far for the past 3 or 4 years, so I got no problem doing that. But if you want to help out, if you want to throw, like I said, a little support my way, you can join my Patreon for as little as $1 a month, $12 a year. That's all I'm asking for, folks. Patreon.com/StephenRor. And in return, I'm going to do my very best to give you podcast episodes just like this one before anybody else gets them. And by anybody else, I mean you and the other patrons. You guys are going to get them. But anybody who's not a patron, they're going to get them at the regular time. They got to wait like a bunch of chumps. I don't mean that. I'm not trying to anger anybody because, I'm not done asking you. I'm not done asking you for stuff, because I also invite you to subscribe to the Steven Says Stuff newsletter. This is a free Substack where I'm going to send you every podcast episode I create each and every week right to your inbox the morning they are released. There is an option if you sign up to sign up for the paid version. I'll tell you right now, that's up to you if you want to sign up for the paid version. It's a little bit more than what we're asking for on the Patreon, because it doesn't allow me to go any lower than that. But I don't really have anything to offer you over there on the Substack, except, again, episodes before anybody else other than the patrons get them. Beyond all that, I would really quite enjoy it and love it deep in my heart if you rated and reviewed the show, if that option is available wherever you get your podcasts. All of those links, the email address, the phone number, all of that is going to be listed in your show notes. So next week, again, it's an off week. According to Mike's Amazing World of Comics at Mike'sAmazingWorld.com, there were no issues in the Death of Superman event released the week of November 8th back in 1992. However, I'm going to put together a little bonus episode for you. We're going to have a number of off weeks throughout this season because of when these issues were released. And frankly, I'm not going to do a bonus episode or bonus episodes every single off week. But if I'm able to, I'm gonna. And so I want to go ahead and put one together for you guys for our very first off week. And here's what I'm going to try to do. I've got the Death of Superman 30th anniversary special that DC released back in November. And so I would like to put an episode together in which I talk about any of the feedback that I've received thus far and talk about that 30th anniversary special. It's going to depend. I haven't read it yet. We'll see what's in it. If it's anything that I don't know. I can't think of any reason why I wouldn't want to talk about it, because just based on the description, it sounds like a lot of fun, because they got a lot of the creative teams back. I think it's 4 stories in there, and I'm looking forward to reading it. So until next week, folks, I'm going to let you go. Goodbye. Fart, fart, fart. Poopity poopity poop, poop, fart, fart, poop.